Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fitrah, as the MC Faraz has previously introduced me to. I'm 21 years old, Vietnamese background, Australian born, Australian raised, and my parents are Vietnamese from Vietnam, and they're Buddhists, conservative Buddhists, and growing up, they never really sort of enforced the religion onto me, so I really didn't grow up with anything. But I did go to church services when I was 11 years old, because my parents thought that my Vietnamese language was, and regrettably still, deteriorating. And the church, they offered Vietnamese classes, so we went there for a good bit. But the funny thing is, my younger brother and I, we really weren't interested in Vietnamese classes, so we'd always run around and wreak havoc. And at one point we were dubbed the devil children. And so that's not really related to my story, but I just thought I'd share that. Anyway, it first started when my father thought, when my dad finished paying off our house in Canterbury. So he wanted to move to a cheaper place, which turned out to be Lakemba, across the street from the masjid. So we moved to Lakemba.
Can you just click on?
Yeah. Okay. Easier for me too. So we moved to Lakemba, across the street from the masjid, and the funny thing was that my mum had actually requested that place a long time before we moved there, and so we moved there, and then after that, it wasn't until a few years that I noticed. It wasn't until a few years that I noticed a noticeable change, because up until then it was always sort of getting to know Islam, getting to know what Muslims do, their practices, sort of making a database for myself in the community, and it wasn't until about year 11 when I met this sister through a business program that I was doing during school. And so I got to know, and it was interesting for me because I never saw the hijab outside of around where I lived. So I got her side of things, like her perspective, and then after that she passed my contact details onto someone who forwarded me on to her brother, and that was Faraz, the MC who just introduced me. And after that, he called me and he introduced himself to sort of break the ice. I'm an economics student. We both go to UNSW, and I do design there. So we got to know each other, and then he recommended me to go to these fortnightly talks organized by Matah, the organization that he introduced you with. And so I went to these talks, and they were interesting for me because there were topics that I've never really heard about before. So they were about the unseen and inspiring stories about the Sahaba, and just stuff that I've never heard before. So for me, as someone who wasn't a Muslim, it was very interesting. Though when I went there, it was a little awkward for me because I was yet to become a Muslim, and these talks were around Maghrib time, so everyone would pray. So I was asking myself, what should I do in this situation? Should I just pretend to pray or just sit outside? And at that time I was just sitting outside because I wasn't a Muslim yet. But I went to these talks for a good year and a half, and alongside with that, I was doing my own research and reading recommended books this one book was recommended to me. It was a very short book, and it was supposed to explain the logical deduction of the existence of God, and how that the Quran is the book of God. And I was skeptical because it was only 10 pages and it was a very small book. But it was the most dense literature I've ever read. But after reading that, I was convinced that I would embrace Islam. So I called Brother Faraz and told him that I was ready. And we organised a date. He told me what I needed to do to prepare. And the day came when I would embrace Islam. And so I showed up at the place already, and then I called him. And then he's like, "Oh, sorry, bro, I haven't had time to properly organise everything. Can we do it next week?" So I was a bit gutted, you know. What if as long as I don't die in between that week, I'll be okay, right? So the next week came, and I showed up at where we would do the proceedings, and I was welcomed with a few brothers that I've grown with through the Matah group, and 20 minutes later, and I was Muslim. I took the Shahada, it was recorded, but I never received the recording. We took some photos, we exchanged some hugs, handshakes, congratulations, a brother showing up late, and that was pretty much it. And so I was walking home, feeling all happy. I've become a Muslim, new start, feeling good, and the first thing I see when I get home is my mom sitting in the lounge. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to break this to her? And so she said hi, and she said, "Peter, the Muslims are fasting today." And it was also the first day of Ramadan 2009. And she said, "Peter, the Muslims are starting to fast today." And I said, and she would have known this because we would have lived in Lakemba about 3 years. So we sort of familiarized ourselves with what happens with my needs and stuff. I remember one time my father gave me earplugs the night before because we knew that it would get pretty loud. But so she told me, "Peter, the Muslims have started to fast today." And I said, "Yeah, so have I." Because after I took the Shahada, I started fasting straight away. And she was shocked. She was like, "What? You're not a Muslim?" And I said, "Yeah, I became one today." And in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best way to approach it. Because for me, as her eldest son, to tell her that I'm not living her way of life, but adopting something else which is negatively portrayed by the media, it would come across quite shocking, and she was very shocked. So things went dead silent, and I thought at that point it was okay to go to my room to do work. But as I left, she stood up and followed me, and then she said, "You can't be a Muslim." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because Islam is for Arabs, and you're Vietnamese." And I said, "No, Islam is for everyone and anyone who wants to embrace Islam." And then she said, "Well, you can't be a Muslim because I'm Vietnamese and I'm your mother, therefore, and I'm Buddhist, and you're Vietnamese and you're my son, therefore you're Buddhist." And I disagreed wholeheartedly, and she said, "Well, under this roof, there can only be one religion, and that's my religion, Buddhism." And I said, "Okay, well, what if I move out?" And hearing other revert stories, they have been a lot more extreme than my case. So alhamdulillah, it was very good. But at that point, it was very emotional. So my mom didn't react, but she just kind of walked away after hearing the suggestion of me moving out of the house. So after that, it was okay for a while, but we could tell that there was still some tension. I could still tell that there was some tension between my mother and myself. But I remember one day when we were both at home for the whole day, and it was during Ramadan as well. So I thought that, because I generally tried to stay out of the house until everything was just settled down. But that one day I didn't have anything to do, so I just stayed at home and did work, and I was still fasting. And my mum bought food and put it on my table, and she said, "I made you food, eat this." And I said, "No, Mum, you know I'm fasting, I can't eat this, not until later on. It's still during the daytime." And then she said, "Well, I personally think fasting is stupid, because, what if you're old, or what if you're sick, or what if you're working all day and it's hot weather, just over-exaggerating every kind of situation." And I told her, there's concessions. There's concessions for fasting, and, it shouldn't be used as an excuse to change your everyday routine. And I told her this, and then she said, "Okay, well, if you don't eat this, I'll kill myself. Will take my own life." And at that point, I was just shocked that she would even suggest anything like that. So I thought, okay, well, I just came to Islam. I'm sure it would be okay just this once. So, and then after that, on another day, she came to me. She said, and this was after a heated argument as well. She said, "If you don't give up your religion, Islam, then I will kill myself." So she used the same sort of threat again, but this time I told her, I'm just going to go out for a walk and think about things. But I knew that I was not going to give up Islam. So I went for a walk and just called some of the brothers that I first met, and they were there to support me. They were just there to just talk to, and it was good because I had someone to go to when my usual uni friends wouldn't understand my situation. So the small bunch of brothers from the Matah gatherings, they were there when I called them. But after that, things just sort of mellowed down, and after a while, things just started getting a lot better. I remember last Ramadan, 2011, where I think it was the biggest breakthrough with my mom. I remember walking home and I passed her, and she asked me, "Peter, do you want me to make you something to eat for work at lunch?" And this was on the first day of Ramadan, or the day before the first day. And she asked me if I wanted her to make anything for me to eat at lunch, because she always asks me if I want food. And then I said, "No, tomorrow I start fasting." And then she said, "Okay, well, in that case, do you want me to make you food to eat before you start fasting?" So food for the morning, for sahur. And I thought, subhanAllah, it's been a long journey, but in the end, it's definitely worth it. And one of the hardest things to overcome, but it has been the best decision of my life. So as I was walking home that day, I was actually teary just to reflect on how far I've come, and that's pretty much it. And ever since then, I've just been getting involved in dawah, as the MCA said. It kind of reminds me of this scene in Star Wars. I'm not sure if any of you have seen it, but it's a scene where Darth Vader tells Luke that, "Luke, I am your father." Islam was sort of, to me, in that kind of sense, because it's as if I was being told, "Peter, you're now part of a global ummah." So my first reaction was, "What? That's crazy, right? I mean, like, we're connected with people overseas and everything." But as time grew, I quickly came to realize this, and I realized that our brothers and sisters overseas, not much more our brothers and sisters than our brothers and sisters here. So I've always I've committed a part of my life to sort of cater to that, to sort of make sure that I do what I can do to make the lives of our brothers and sisters better. And you know, it's hard to struggle, it's hard to juggle everything, but you know, I do what I can. So yeah. Thank you.